You ever stop for a moment and assess the propaganda we were told to accept growing up? Like, historically speaking, brave, yes, but free who? And who we going around spreading democracy to when we barely got one over here? Because, that means a government by and for the people, not profit. They sure spell capitalism real strange. Let's take a look at the history of real democracy here in the U.S.
Okay, so here we go. From 1526 to 1865, this country was founded on the invasion and massacre of indigenous states and the trafficking of African lives to build its wealth. Now, from the 1600s to the 1800s, most of those invaded states would only let land-owning white men to vote in them. Like, you had to be white, male, own property, or pay taxes. Light work. I mean, just definitely not the poor white Europeans who were working off their prison sentences on plantations. The voting club was not for them, okay? They were there, like the rest of the color folk, to build wealth for the rich white elite men from Europe. I mean, duh. But this changed around the 1820s with the conquering of Midwestern states like Ohio and Indiana from their original First Nation groups. Why? You see, by the late 1700s, most poor white folk had worked off their indentured servitude sentences and started having to be paid, so pesky. And predictably, most did not receive the property they were promised by the rich white folk. Now, this was about the time of the 1776 Declaration of Independence, when rich whites announced they were free from paying off their original British investors of the invasions of Turtle Island, rebranded America, because the British were doing entirely too much, okay? And the American colonizers wanted the right to be able to do entirely too much to people of color without the pesky British breathing down their necks, okay? I mean, can't we just colonize in peace? Which the poor whites helped them to do, mind you, because it sure wasn't the rich white folks putting their behinds on the line. It was the poor whites conquering more than new states the rich whites claimed, which means the poor whites weren't having this whole not being able to vote in a country that helped to steal, police, and farm. So the rich whites had some thinking to do and had to eventually make some concessions for the poor whites in order to avoid an all-out rebellion. But of course, say they did this because it was the right thing to do because of evolving political philosophy. Yeah, so it was that non-landowning poor white men began gaining the right to vote in the early 1800s, especially between 1820 and 1850 in what was called the Jacksonian era, the universal white male suffrage era, because it was the right thing to do. Damn it. By 1856, North Carolina was the last one to get on board to not shoot themselves in the foot. So poor whites got the right to vote. Now, during all that time, black African people in this country couldn't vote, keep their families, get paid for their labor, be guaranteed any bit of safety, security, humanity, or decency. Because why would they? When African Americans were finally free from this nightmare in 1865, they still were not allowed to vote or participate in this so-called democracy due to local Jim Crow laws. Real convenient. In fact, black and indigenous people didn't even for real get to vote in this country until about 1965, just in time for immigrants to come in and not know an iota of what they went through to get all of us the rights we have today. Go figure. Now, white women got their right to vote in 1919, long before people of color, obviously, and indigenous people were just then allowed to be citizens of the country that invaded their homelands in about 1924. And prior to 1913's 17th Amendment, the entire Senate was an elite team of rich white folks that only the predominantly white wealthies voted into their elite club. They would have gotten away with it if it wasn't until 2010 now welcome, poor, working, middle class, and colored citizens started smelling something funny going on in politics. American politicians were bought out by large corporations. How we never caught that before? And so in 2010, an American Supreme Court case ruling Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, FEC, supreme judges of the land stamped that rich elite white men's corporations of course could officially allow to influence politics and buy out all politicians. What have you been? Which, if you think about it, they were already allowed to do since the beginning of invasions, hence slavery written into the Constitution. Yeah, that means they were doing it the whole time when nobody noticed. Fast forward to now, most Americans thinking that choosing between two capitalist, predominantly white elite political parties that colonize the rest of the melanated world is somehow progress, as long as we're good. And by good, I mean we pay them taxes but still have to come out of pocket for healthcare, housing, food, and if you're black, indigenous, Latino, even your human rights at times. Might have to go ahead and come up off those.
But what's this all mean? This hasn't been a democratic state, it's been a capitalist one, which means we just get to buy stuff in it. The choice part is whoever the colonizers put in front of our face, aka the TV screens and internet presence they buy. And it's really what it's always been, which is a war of elite industries. Which isn't really a war, it's more theatrics, because at the end of the day, they all making paper. And that's why when a non-capitalist shows up and it's like, hey, all right, vote for me, we hate them because we've been programmed to. Next up, the actual foundations of American society. Hint, it's human trafficking.